What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the High PSI Performance YouTube channel. Hope you guys are having a good day. Hope everybody is enjoying this process of getting back to work after this coronavirus stuff. It's not over with, but some people are getting back to work. Today we got a good one for you. We got a little bit of redeye action, wide body redeye. So let me get the shop opened up here and get some of these cars out, and we'll get right to it. Alright guys, so we've got the Hellcat redeye on the lift, and we're going to go ahead and get these wheels off real quick. I want to show you what we got going on this one. Got a drive shaft, trailing arms, end links, and KW coilover springs going on this thing. So that'd be pretty cool. Get some low into it, and then help it do a little bit better at the track. So stick with us, stay tuned. Hope you enjoy a little bit of suspension work on this redeye wide body. Alright guys, got her up in the air and got the wheels off of her. I'm gonna take a peek underneath this thing real quick. Still very clean. Looks like he takes good care of it. We're probably gonna go ahead and get this exhaust system out of the way and get the drive shaft knocked out, and we'll probably do some of the other suspension components, and then we'll head into the lowering springs. So, let's get it. Alright guys, to get these rear sway bar end links replaced, you're going to need a 15mm for this side and a 16mm wrench on this side, and then the opposite for the top portion. Take those out, lube up the new ones, put them in place. So, show you what that looks like. One thing I wanted to note for you guys real quick is we put a little bit of bushing grease on here. On the sway bars end links, I would say it's not a super requirement. However, you just take, the extra 2 seconds, put a little bearing grease or bushing grease or whatever kind of grease that you have. Put that on here, and just it's a little bit of assurance to make sure that it won't make any squeaking noises when it's going over bumps or whatever the case may be. One side's complete. So we'll go ahead and repeat those same steps for the other side, and then we'll go ahead and go after these trailing arms right here. Alright guys, I want to take a quick second to talk about these trailing arms. So the new BMR trailing arms are adjustable. So for you guys installing these things, go ahead and take the old one, put the bolt through it, and then line the bolts up with the new one. They may be a little bit shorter, you need to open them up. But for starters, get them back to the same length that the OEM one is. And then once you get, all your parts on, whether you go with lowering springs, coilovers, bags, whatever the case may be, once that stuff's on, then get it set up. If you need to make an adjustment on them, that's the time to make it afterwards. Especially if you're putting them on and then you're gonna do some other stuff, down the road shortly. Put them at the same length that they come, or that the OEM ones are, so that way everything sits the way it should from the factory, until you actually make a change where you need to change the actual length of that trailing arm. So just a tech tip for that, guys. And then to recap, it's two 18mm bolts, bolting the nut here, bolting the nut there, pull them out, swap the arm, bolt it back. So I'm gonna go ahead and knock that out on both sides and show you what that looks like. And just like that, guys, the New trailing arm with spherical bushings. Adjustable. RN. So now we're gonna go ahead and get this exhaust system down out of the way, which will give us room to do the springs, and will also give us room to get this drive shaft in here. We got the exhaust system down out of the way. To kind of recap for the people that haven't taken an exhaust down on one of these yet, it's pretty much no different than any of the other Hemis, but just to recap, right here there's a 13mm bolt that holds the rubber isolator for the exhaust. There's one on each side. 13mm undo those. Unplug the exhaust valves and then pop the hangers out of the rubber on both sides. And then up here at the mid-pipe section, the exhaust connects onto here, and there's two exhaust clamps, and they're both 15mm bolts, one on each side. You undo those, and then just wiggle the system out, and that gives us access to the drive shaft here. Next, we're gonna go ahead and remove the 4 10mm nuts holding the heat shield down to get to the carrier bearing, and then we'll undo all the Torx bits holding the drive shaft in, and then there's two 13mm holding the carrier bearing up to the chassis. So go ahead and do that now. I wanted to take a quick second and talk about something else. So this is the adapter flange that gets put onto the differential when you're running a drive shaft. So these inner bolts need to be torqued to 57 foot-pounds. Also remember to put a little dab of Loctite on them when you put them in. We don't want any of these backing out or rattling out. So a tip for you guys, especially you do-it-yourselfers, let's say you're at the house doing this on your own, when you go to put these bolts in, you go to tighten them, obviously this is going to turn. So a trick some of you may know or some of you may not know is if you take a screwdriver and stick it in the rotor on both sides, it will keep, you know, because everything's going to try to spin, it'll basically lock the drive shafts up. And what's nice is it doesn't damage anything, doesn't hurt nothing, but it'll lock this down and keep it from spinning, so that way you can torque it pretty easy. And you can use the same trick again when you put the drive shaft in, but you won't have to because the transmission will be in park and that'll lock everything up so you can torque it. But that's a little quick tip for you guys doing this on your own. But now we got this in, we'll go ahead and put the front of the drive shaft in, Loctite it, torque it down, and then we'll put the back side on, and the big back 4 bolts, same deal, Loctite, and torque those to 70 foot-pounds. So you'll do 57 on the front side as well. All right, so let's get that knocked out. And there you have it, guys. Drive shaft shop 4-inch aluminum drive shaft is installed. Everything's been torqued down. So we're gonna go ahead and put the heat shield back up, and then we could put the exhaust back up, but I'm actually gonna hold off because it's gonna make gaining access to this bolt right here easier. That's the way we at High PSI have found it easiest to do the rear springs, is to put this pole jack right here, place that underneath here, take this bolt out, undo the bolts on the shock up top there, and when you pull that bolt out, slowly dropping this down, and that's the easiest way to get the springs out on these. So we're gonna go ahead and do that next. Put these KW coilover lowering springs in, and then once we have those locked in there, then we'll go ahead and put the rear exhaust back on, and then we'll go ahead and knock out the front suspension. So just to let you guys know on sizing, the bolts up there that hold the strut in are 16 millimeters. The bolt that goes through here is a 15 millimeter head, and then on the back side here is going to be an 18 millimeter, and then just pull that bolt out. Alright guys, as you can see, we've got this side done. We've got the new KW coilover spring in, and we got the new bump stops. Oh. Sorry about that. We got the new bump stops put into the shock. And then this side's all been put back together. And then I'll give you guys a peek as we're about to do the other side, what it looks like. Got the 15mm bolt out here, and then I've got the shock undone. So now that that's all loosened up, I can go ahead and change everything out, and then put the new spring in, a new bump stop, and it'll be wrapped up on the back half of the car. Then we can put the exhaust system on, and then we'll move to the front. Alright guys, now we're going to go ahead and move to the front of this wide body. The front's going to be just a little bit different, you know, whether it's obviously a Hellcat or a Charger, or a Challenger like SRT8 or whatever. But on the Hellcats and the redeyes and the Demons and stuff, you're going to have this coolant reservoir for the supercharger that it's over top of the strut. So pretty easy on that, just 10mm bolt and a 10mm bolt on the backside, and you kind of gently flip it up out of the way, and that'll gain you access to the 13mm on the top hat. And then on the other side, similar deal. You've got this basically looks like a crankcase ventilation valve of some kind. I'm not sure the technical name of this because it's only on the 18 and newer stuff, but just 10mm bolts holding that on as well, and you can move it out of the way to gain access to the 13mm on the top hat. That's pretty much it on the top portion to get the strut out. And then grab a light here. On the lower section, you've got this 18mm nut here, and then you're gonna need a panel popper for right here. That way you can pop this out to gain access to the plug for the active dampening suspension. And then you're also going to want to take out the end link bolt attached to the strut up here. I believe that's 21, and then the lower bolts and nut on the strut assembly right there. Now that nut is welded to the strut, so you're going to take the bolt side out. And sorry about that guys, got a little phone call action. There you go, now you can see that bolt. Anyways, take that bolt out, and then the whole strut assembly will come out. So we'll go ahead and pop it out, and then go ahead and install the KW coil spring. Alright guys, as you can see, the strut's out. Another note, if you happen to have any big zip ties, bungee cord, something of that nature, after you bust it loose, you're going to want to support it. So that way you're not putting excess stress on the brake lines and the ABS sensors. You can see they're nice and loose and have some freedom, so they're not being tugged on. But now that we got the strut out, we can go ahead and disassemble it. And there you have it guys, KW coilover springs installed on the Bilstein shock. I'll say, you know, in comparison to putting springs on, there's a lot more things to be done with these versus just regular springs, but it's not overly difficult. I'll go over everything that needs to be done on the other side one, but for now let's go ahead and get this one installed and get this side of the car put back together. And there you have it, all installed. So I'm going to take a second here to kind of go over basically how to take this assembly apart. So the nut is a 17mm, or excuse me, 18mm, sorry, 18mm nut that holds this assembly together. What I do is I just kind of brace the assembly and then zip the 18 off, and then take it apart. Now on the KWs, we actually have to remove this lower spring perch. So in order to do that, I'm going to set you guys down right here. There is, I don't know how well you can see it right here, there's a rubber, kind of like an O-ring right here. And what I like to do is take a pick and push a little bit of that O-ring up, and then it'll kind of come off here. So we'll delicately stretch that O-ring off, set it aside. We're saving all the stock parts, putting it back in the box for the customer, just in case down the road, if he ever decides to sell the car and put the stock suspension back on, he's able to do so. Next step is this dust collar right here. It looks like it's pressed on, and it is, but it's not permanent, and it can be removed and put back on. As you can see, that's preventing that from coming off. So with a little bit of, you can almost use this like a slide hammer. And that ring will pop right off. There's the actual dust cover vent. And then if you look on it too, let's see, you can see there's a mark right there. And there's usually a mark on the shaft. This particular one, there is not. But usually from the factory they'll mark both pieces, that way you can get the orientation exactly. But if you look at it, you can see where it's touching and where it's not, where it's removing some of the yellow paint on the Bilstein shaft. So we'll just, line those marks back up when we put that back on. You also see right here, there's like basically like a C-clip or a snap ring that stays on there. And separate that ring for a second. This is the lower ring assembly with the adjustment for the coilover. And if you see right here, it's slotted. That slot is for the space for the active dampening system, the electronic dampening system. So when you slide this collar on, that opening, go ahead and slide that on. That opening needs to orientate in that area. Now, one thing I will mention, if you see there's some Allens, slide this up some. As you can see, there's some Allens right here. You're going to want to back those Allens off if you can grab them by hand, so that way you can get over this clip. And so as you can see, now it'll surpass it, and then it actually rests on that C-clip. And then, like I said, just orientate this to where there's space on both sides, so the collar never hits. Now these Allens right here, they need to be torqued down to 2 Newton meters, no more, no less. So we're gonna snug those by hand, and then we'll go ahead and assemble the rest of the shock, and then I'll come back in and torque those down. Also, at this point, you want to make sure the spacing that you have here matches on both sides, obviously, so the car sits level and rides level. So I'm going to stop the video here real quick and double check, eyeball, count the threads, measure, and make sure I get this distance the same as I did on the first shot. Now that we've got the collar rings matching, we're going to go ahead and put the next section on. So this is basically a spacer ring that goes in between the smaller spring and then the larger spring, so we'll slide that down. And then now that all this is good, remember that dust cover. We're gonna go ahead and get that dust cover put back on. So we'll push this back over and kind of look at where the indentations are. I know this framing hammer, not really what I would normally use, but just very lightly work it around until it goes all the way back down. And that'll solve that. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and install our dust boot and bump stop. Now that's installed, we can go ahead and put our spring in. See how all that kind of fits together there. Now that we have that, we're going to go ahead and set this aside for a second, because there's a modification that needs to be made to the top hat section. The new KW, being that it has a built-in bump stop and dust cover setup, whereas the factory is a two-piece, and the factory dust boot, let me get this separated here. As you can see, that factory dust boot on the lower top hat is attached, and it will not fit. It's too large to fit inside the new KW spring, so we need to remove it from the top hat before we install it. So I'm going to set this down real quick and go ahead and remove this dust boot from the top hat. Only takes a second. Get the dust boot off, and then you see you got your old bump stop in there. Just pop that out. So got those out. Set those over there in the box, and now we have just the top hat. Set the spring back up, and then what you're going to want to do is look at your top hat, and there's a recess in the top hat where the actual final coil of the spring right here rests. So we're going to want to orientate that to where it is in line, and then we'll go ahead and give her a push together. Grab our nut, press down, and there you have it. Coil is assembled. We're going to go ahead and tighten the top hat down and then get this thing installed back in the car.